So we're continuing our conversations with a number of different Republicans running in the 2022 midterm elections. Today, we're going to be speaking with John Gibbs. John Gibbs is a Trump-endorsed Republican, the former Assistant Secretary for Community Planning and Development at HUD in the Trump administration, and is running in Michigan's 3rd congressional district. The incumbent in that race is Peter Meijer. It's great to have you on, John. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on, David. I really appreciate it.
So let's start with something really easy, just to kind of get started. Donald Trump took a bit of issue with your opponent's last name having a silent J in it. He seemed not to like that at a recent rally. You take no issue with the spelling of your opponent's name, right?
Well, I think the difference is I'm from Michigan, and so we grew up seeing the supermarket chain and whatnot, so we're really used to it. But I can see how someone who's not from here, like President Trump, would not be familiar with that spelling or how to pronounce it. So, that's just how I look at it.
Beautiful. Okay. So I want to start with what is leading you to run. Most people who choose to run say, well, to some degree, people in media and people in politics, in a sense, there's a narcissistic element, right? Like if you're in media and you want to talk, you have to, on some level, think what I'm saying is at least as interesting as what anybody else is going to have to say. And if you're going to run for office to some degree, you believe you can do a better job than the person that's there. So tell me about that. What problems do you see that you think you can fix?
The list goes on and on, but we have inflation, which is causing gas prices to, skyrocket through the roof. We have empty shelves at stores, and you have high prices at grocery stores as well for basic things like chicken or pork chops, whatever it might be. This is having a huge impact on the middle class and working class folks, especially the poor and minorities. We really got to step up and do something about this. So, and that's just domestically. That doesn't talk about Afghanistan and the botched withdrawal and Ukraine and what's going on there. So I think there's just a very long list of issues that we need to address. And I think, very humbly, based on my experience in DC for 4 years in our administration, I got to learn the machinery of how government works. I was there for longer than my primary opponent has been there, so I've got more experience than him in that. Also, I'm a regular guy. I'm not from a super loaded background. So I know what it's like to connect with regular folks. So I think I've got the best of both worlds there. But David, you do have a point. I mean, you have people who are narcissistic, and this profession does attract those kind of people. And I myself, after our administration, was not planning on going into politics. I was in fact planning on becoming a regular person again. Maybe doing some work for a think tank or something, and just getting out of the spotlight for a bit. But then some friends, said, "Hey, why don't you go back home to Michigan and take a run against this Peter Meijer guy who voted to impeach Trump?" And it took me a while. I thought about it a lot. I prayed about it, made sure I had my ducks in a row, and ended up diving in head first to do it. But it's not really necessarily what I was thinking. I was kind of looking forward to just being a regular person again. So, it does really take something to jump in here and do this. It's very busy. You're going to get attacked, and there's long hours, and there's scrutiny and things. But I do really think it's worth it because, we need the leadership in there, which is lacking right now.
So you mentioned three issues there. The first one was inflation and gas prices and product prices. That's something that's happening globally right now. There's a number of issues there. As one of 435 members of Congress in the United States, what would you do to deal with the issue of inflation, which is a global one?
Well, it's a global issue to some degree, but a lot of this money that's been printed and the spending that's happening does have global impact because the investors take that money and they invest it all around the world. So I do think the Europeans certainly have their share of guilt in this for doing some of the same stuff we're doing. But I think when you look at the kind of spending and the kind of money printing that's happening, you're getting what's called the Cantillon effect, which is where all this money goes in to the economy in an inefficient way and ends up driving up prices in a way that is harmful to regular folks. So we do have to look at the money printing and the spending, which are two of the critical points behind this. And David, you have a very good point. If I were to win, God willing, I'm one of 435. So I need to form coalitions. I need to have people that are on my side. I need to have the maturity to understand that everybody that we're in coalition with won't agree on every issue.
But John, I hate to interrupt, but I really like that. I love talking about policy, and I want to stay on that instead of the coalition. You're talking about money printing. Now, Joe Biden's administration did pass this infrastructure package, and that includes government spending. And we could debate whether it's the type of spending that you like or that you don't like. But the deficit declined during Joe Biden's first year compared to Donald Trump's last year. In other words, spending in total, the rate at which we overspent went down in the first year of Joe Biden's presidency. Would you agree with those numbers from the Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan? Not the debt. Now, remember, I know you know the difference. You're a Harvard guy. The deficit went down in Joe Biden's first year. Do you agree with those numbers, or you dispute them?
I'll need to check that because I've actually heard differing views on that. So I'd want to go back and look at numbers and see if there's any fuzzy math going on there.
As a general rule, do you dispute numbers from the Congressional Budget Office, or is that a fair source in your mind?
I think it's not so much fair or not. It's a matter of there are many ways to look at these numbers. There are different ways of calculating a deficit in terms of what you include, what don't you include. Does it come off the budget this year or next year or the year after? So I think there's lots of different ways to slice the pizza here, and I need to look at the way they're doing that to make a determination on that.
Would you agree that at least the Congressional Budget Office is doing it the same way every year? Is that at least fair? They are consistent in how they measure the deficit?
I'd have to take a look at that again and go
Wow.
back and look at their methodology to see what's the case there. But
So let me ask you this then. If you're not sure whether we can trust the numbers of the Congressional Budget Office, what numbers do you have as a basis to say that the spending is out of control?
oh, we can easily look at the amount of money the government's spending. That's a much simpler calculation there. We can easily look at inflation, CPI, and whatnot. Those are pretty standard in the way they're calculated. So we have a pretty good sense of what those numbers are.
But I think so. Let's see. But the problem is you blamed the spending on the inflation. So, like, for example, in this conversation, I'm agreeing with you. Inflation has been high. We're 100% on the same. There's no dispute about those numbers. You made the assertion that you believe the inflation to some degree is because the spending is out of control. I said typically we look at the Congressional Budget Office for that, and they found that the deficit was down in Joe Biden's first year of the presidency. You said you're not sure if you trust those numbers. And when I asked you, well, how do you know spending is up? You said, well, because I looked at the inflation numbers. But your first claim was the inflation numbers you believe are because spending was up. But now you're saying the inflation numbers are the spending numbers? That doesn't make sense, does it?
What doesn't make sense is high gas prices that regular people cannot afford. What doesn't make sense is I had black pastors come to me saying people in our congregation cannot afford to drive to work because gas prices are too high. What doesn't make sense is if the price of a pack of chicken or beef or whatever you're buying at the grocery store is twice as high. That certainly doesn't make sense. And so that's the problem we got to solve.
Right. We agree gas prices are high, but you made the assertion that it's because of Biden's spending, whereas gas prices are up globally. And what I'm trying to do is to make that connection. But maybe we're just not going to be able to do that. Let me ask you a different question. Do you agree that since the peak about 2 months ago, gas prices are now down about 20%? Do you dispute those numbers?
What I do know is that gas prices are still far too high. One of the reasons for that is, for example, shutting down the Keystone XL pipeline and totally gutting all efforts to have American energy independence. So we got to go back and reverse those policies so that we can be producing more of our own supply, which will bring prices down. Okay,
but so three different things there. You didn't answer my question, and you also made two claims that were wrong. So I'm gonna do my best to keep up here. So, do you agree gas prices are down about 20% from their peak 2 months ago?
What I agree on is that gas prices are significantly higher than they were when Joe Biden came in office, and we got to fix this problem and bring it back down.
Do you dispute that the gas prices are down 20%?
What I dispute is that gas prices are good. They're not good. They're still too high.
Okay, that's fair.
Whatever the number is 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever one might be, it's still too high. That's the point.
Fair. So now, see, John, you
do not really care if it's down 20% over the past couple of months, whatever. But what I do care about is way higher than it needs to be.
So you made an assertion, and I agree. See, I can very simply agree with you. You're right. They're still too high. See how I'm very simply agreeing with you. Are you disputing just that they've come down 20%, or do you agree that they have?
I try to spend time on the relevant questions when I look at my policy, and the relevant issue here is we got to bring the gas prices down.
How do you know they have to come down more if you won't even concede they're down 20%? How do you even know what they are?
I know that they're way higher than they were when Biden got in there, and we got to fix that problem.
Okay, so it's not sounding like you're willing to even in good faith concede they're down 20%. Can you tell me why?
I can tell you that I care about high gas prices because it affects everybody, especially those who are poor and working class and the middle class as well.
Right, I agree with you.
Down.
I agree with you. But you seem to be unable to agree with me on just basic facts. It's weird. Let's move on to the next thing you said, which was Keystone XL is responsible, not having Keystone XL. I want to make sure I know what you're saying, John. Not having Keystone XL is responsible for gas prices being high. Is that an accurate assessment of what you said 2 minutes ago?
It's certainly part of the picture.
Okay.
We do have to increase domestic production. That's the overall point.
Did you know that Keystone XL would not increase domestic production because it's merely a transport method from Canada?
That's right, yes.
Okay.
And we do have stuff coming from Canada as well.
Okay.
We want to do anything to get more supply in here.
So if the Keystone XL pipeline phase 4 wouldn't increase production, and you just said what we need to do is increase production, how could it be responsible for gas prices being high?
We've got to do both, obviously. We've got to open up that pipeline and also get more domestic production.
But you first said the pipeline not being open is responsible for high prices. What I'm saying is, since it wouldn't lead to any more production, how is it affecting the prices?
Because we need to have more coming in here from everywhere, whether that's domestic production, whether it's from Canada. So,
but it wouldn't change how much is coming in. It would only change how it's getting here.
Yeah, and we need to have more ways of getting it here, obviously, because that will increase supply along with increasing domestic production as well.
But
so
why would bringing it by pipeline instead of truck lower the price?
Because it's more efficient.
I've never read that before. Where are you getting that?
From people that know about this and people that know that when you have that pipeline open, it's better for increasing the supply as well as increasing our own domestic production along with that.
Okay. Do you have any citations on that? Because I've never heard that.
What I do have a citation on is that gas prices are too high. And we need to
I agree. Okay. I'm finding myself at a bit of a logjam because we seem to not even be able to agree on the kind of basic facts. Let's try a different topic altogether and see if maybe we can make some headway. Who's the president of the United States right now?
Joe Biden is certainly the sitting president, but it looks like President Trump likely won the election. Here's a couple of facts for you, David. One, President Trump got more votes the second time than he got the first time. There's no such thing in American history of a president getting more votes the second time and then losing. It doesn't exist. The second thing we know that's a fact is President Trump won the bellwether counties. And when you win a bellwether county, you win the presidency with 100% predictability. President Trump won those, yet still lost. Both of those are mathematically impossible. So that seems to indicate very strongly that there is some irregularities in the election results. So, you know, people are concerned about this, rightfully so. And so we really got to the bottom of it, as well as increase our election integrity going forward. If we don't have secure elections, we don't have fair elections, you don't have a democracy. So this is a really big issue we've got to address.
Right. Well, I agree with your conclusion. We have to have secure elections. You said that something is an impossibility. And what you said was an impossibility is if you get more votes the second time than the first, historically, you win. Am I understanding that assessment?
Right. Yes.
That's right. Okay. Have you ever seen things happen for the first time in your life, John?
Of course.
Okay. And so something happened for the first time in November of 2020. Is that fair to say? We'll get to whether it happened fairly. Let's not jump ahead, but arguably something happened for the first time in November of 2020, which is a sitting president got more votes and still lost. Fair. It was the first time that happened.
Well, there's different categories of things that happen for the first time.
Okay.
There's getting into a car accident for the first time.
Okay.
Well, guess what? Other people get into car accidents all the time, so we know that it's something that happens.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about getting more votes the second time you got the first time. That's something that never happens. And so that's a different category. That's something that is almost certainly mathematically impossible.
Okay.
So it's not the same category as other things that happen for the first time.
So let me give you an example of something else during the Trump presidency that happened for the first time. And then let's see if we can agree and then extrapolate from that. The average approval rating for Donald Trump during his 4 years was the lowest of any president in the modern era. Would you agree with that? And this is no matter, even if you look at a right-leaning pollster like Rasmussen, which had Trump higher, still, on average, Trump's approval was the lowest of any president in the modern era. Can we agree on that fact?
I might double check that, but let's assume just for argument's sake.
Let's assume it's fair enough. So my suggestion to you as a thinking man, well-educated, everything we're talking at high level here, given that Trump's polling was the lowest of any president in the modern era, which had never, it was unprecedented low. Isn't it also possible that you would see an unprecedented result in the election? Is that possible? Is it possible theoretically?
No, it's not possible for a president to get 20% more votes than they got the first time than still lose. You know,
But
President
you didn't answer the
Barack
question though.
Obama got 3.5 million less votes the second time than the first time. He still won.
Okay.
So you're really looking at just pure impossibilities here.
I'm not. So you're saying that there's lots of things that happened for the first time during the Trump presidency, but this one thing, Trump getting more votes and losing, that one's not possible.
That's correct. Because like
Wow.
I said, different categories of things that happen for the first time.
Wow.
You know, there's
Wow.
some things that happen for the first time that are plausible. There's some that are not.
Why haven't any courts found any merit to the 63 different 2020 election related complaints that have been brought to them? Many of them Trump appointed judges. Why is it?
Because the Democrats had their legal game going in a really good way, I must say. Even though what they're working for was not good, they had people like Mark Elias in charge of it, and they did a good job of it. Our side was slow to react, slow to respond, and did not take this issue seriously enough before the election. That's just a sad fact. I wish it weren't true. So that's the answer to your question there.
But if there were merit, wouldn't a Trump appointed judge say there's merit here, let's proceed?
Well, you know, if you look at our side leading up to the election, when it comes to election integrity,
Yeah.
didn't prepare well enough. That's just a sad fact of it. So
How could you have been more prepared? There was an army of hundreds of lawyers, and Trump said for 6 months it was going to be rigged. How could you have been? What could have been done to be more prepared?
A whole lot more. You need to have action at the state level. You need to have litigation.
They
You need to
did.
have people watching. There was not nearly enough of that going on. You need to have poll watchers. You need to have poll challengers signed up.
Huh.
Look in Virginia, for example, at Governor Youngkin's election.
Yeah.
Typically, in an election in Virginia, Republicans have coverage at 20% of the precincts as poll watchers.
Okay.
But when Governor Youngkin won, Republicans had 90% coverage at the precincts. That's a concrete example of something that the Republicans did that was smart and that made an impact in the election. And what I'm saying and I'm suggesting here is that we didn't have enough of that leading up to the 2020 election, which is why you saw some of the results you did. And that carries over, David, as well to the legal issues where there's not enough preparation, very sadly. So, yeah, I think we've got to bring our A game next time.
Why do you think that in Arizona, the audit that was done extended Joe Biden's lead?
I have to go look at that. A lot of these audits, they simply recounted the existing ballots, which is not what you do. You want to go through and do a more thorough look to see which ones are valid and which ones are not, et cetera. But that being said, I need to go back and read the details of that to find out exactly what happened. But yeah, I mean, we really have got to make sure we increase our election integrity. People are losing faith in the system. There are people saying they're not going to vote anymore because of what happened. So we really have got to restore the public's confidence in our election system.
You know, the polling shows that the American people are actually very confident in our election systems. It's just some Trumpists that aren't. But what indicator are you seeing that at the national level, Americans aren't confident? Because I just looked at polling and Americans seem very confident.
And I've looked at polling that says the opposite. Something like over half of all people believe that the 2020 election results were not legitimate. Even among
That's not true.
Even among independents, the number I believe was over 50%.
No.
And among Democrats, the number was something like in 30 to 40% range. So there's a very, very significant number of people that believe that, unfortunately, there were real irregularities in the 2020 election. And that's why we've got to restore the public's confidence in the election process.
I mean, I think, you know, that's not true that that's what the polling is. In the immediate aftermath of the election, 57% of Trump voters believed that. That number has since declined dramatically. And right now, only about 20% of overall Americans believe that. But I think I have a different question, which is just because of a lot of Americans believe something, does that mean we change our laws for that? What's your philosophy on that?
Well, you know, I think you have a point there, David, that we do what's right, not based on popular opinion. But this is a nation where popular opinion does happen to be right, that there were issues. And so, like I said, the results were mathematically impossible. So we've got to look at what happened, and we've also got to make sure elections are secure going forward. You
know, it's weird because everybody who is saying that this was a mathematical impossibility, so I'm hearing you say it. I don't know if you're familiar who Mike Lindell is. He sells pillows on television. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I've heard of him, yes.
Yeah. He says it's a mathematical impossibility. Sometimes lawyers who have no training in mathematics say it's a mathematical impossibility. But then you go to actual statisticians and they say there's nothing here that raises any red flags whatsoever. Do you think there's some reason why it's non-mathematicians that are convinced about the mathematical impossibility? I'm trying to figure that out.
I would bet that if you ask mathematicians, you will find that they will say these are highly irregular numbers, especially the two cases I cited you. So I believe that there are many who would admit that these numbers are impossible.
Okay. When it comes to your platform, if you were lucky enough to win in 2022, and I know you've got to run in a couple minutes, so we'll kind of end on this note. What would be your goal with regard to what is being threatened as an impeachment of Joe Biden? If Republicans take the House and you win, do you think that that's something that the House of Representatives should prioritize the way Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and others have said?
If the evidence warrants it, absolutely. If the
hmm
evidence says the policies of the Biden administration deliberately have hurt millions of people with recklessness and carelessness, if we determine that, then yes, it would be appropriate.
Do you have any specific policy right now that you suspect might meet that threshold?
I think one, you've got to look at the COVID response.
Hmm.
There needs to be an investigation there. Two, you've got to look at the Afghanistan withdrawal, which got Americans killed.
hmm
And there's also the possibility of looking at Ukraine as well and the absolute lack of leadership that's being shown right now. Those are just some possibilities. And as we dig into those, if we find out that there are high crimes and misdemeanors, then those need to be pursued.
So you're open. I know you're saying you're not saying for sure, but you might support impeaching Joe Biden for his response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Did I hear that correctly?
If there's evidence that American weakness has led to deaths,
Uh-huh.
especially deaths of Americans, which is not as much an issue in Ukraine, but more in Afghanistan, as well as on the southern border, frankly. The whole southern border situation, which is human trafficking, is absolutely outrageous. So if we investigate those and we find that there are high crimes and misdemeanors, then yes, you have a constitutional obligation
Wow.
to do.
So, it's four possible areas of Biden impeachment. It was COVID, Afghanistan, Ukraine, and the border. Is it just those four, or are there more?
Perhaps there could be others. We'll take a look at it and see. And if
Yeah.
we find that there are high crimes and misdemeanors, then we would go to the next step.
Wow. Wow. John Gibbs. John Gibbs is running as a Republican. He's running to unseat Congressman Peter Meijer. That's a silent J, as we now all know. John, I really appreciate your time today. It's quite an eye-opening platform, and I look forward to following your campaign.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.